I love this game. It's my new Streets of Rage 4, it's my new Mortal Kombat 9, it's my new Factorio, it's my new Doom Eternal. What do I mean by that? I mean it's a game that intrigues me so much on a technical level that I can't stop thinking about it. I have put out several tech videos, a tutorial, I've beaten it deathless. You can follow the link in the description if you want to watch my deathless run. I think it's a great game. I have a lot of positive stuff to say about it. I have criticisms too, because Sifu has some missteps on the path to greatness. Let's address the elephant in the room first. A big fat elephant by the name of Sekiro. I do not like Sekiro. I don't think it's bad, I actually think it's very good. There's just a bunch of stuff in it that I don't personally enjoy in my games. The challenge and the player accountability I love. You must learn how to play it well if you're going to be successful. Sifu and Sekiro are very similar in that respect. They're technical melee combat games. They have a parry mechanic and a stamina bar, there's punishing enemies, difficult boss encounters, upgrades, and they're both uncompromising in their vision. So how could I like one so much and dislike the other? Putting aside my preference for Sifu's art style and locations and music, it comes down to three major differences. 1. Speed. I don't need every game to be fast. One of my top 5 games is Silent Hill 2. I love some turn-based games. I even adore a chat simulation game like Emily is Away. I don't need every game to be fast. But for melee combat games, I do need them to be fast. To say Sifu feels faster than Sekiro requires a little explaining. Speed is relative. Even if a game has slow attacks and movement, if you're having to make a lot of decisions very quickly, the gameplay can still be considered fast. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the literal speed of your attacks. I like my melee combat games to have lots of fast attacks and combo series. I like multi-attack Mortal Kombat juggles. I like flashy Ninja Gaiden combos and crazy style-switching Devil May Cry gameplay. I like beating up on 15 dudes at once. It's a personal taste thing. In this regard, Sifu makes me feel like I'm fighting a lot faster than Sekiro. 2. Parries and dodging. I suck at parries. I've always sucked at parries. I suck at the reaction speed, and I suck at the precise timing. But I like when parry systems are available. I use it sometimes in God of War where it's much more forgiving, and a bit in Ninja Gaiden, but you don't need to parry to enjoy those games and find success. It's an option to benefit a preferred playstyle. There's a badass parry mechanic in Devil May Cry 5 that I completely ignored because I don't want to parry. I'd rather fly around with the trickster ability and dash away from everything. Sure, I'm missing out on a mechanic that many players like, but I'm glad that I don't have to parry if I don't want to. Parry or die is not a game I want to play. Sekiro goes in hard on the parry mechanic. Sometimes it felt like I couldn't even hit someone unless I parried them first. I had to hit multiple parries in a row to open someone up. On top of me just not being good at it, even when I really focused and pulled off multiple parries and killed an enemy that way, I didn't feel good about it. It's just not a style of gameplay that excites me. Sifu has a similar parry mechanic, one that is very rewarding, but thankfully there are other defensive options that make the game enjoyable for someone like me. The dodge is fast with quick recovery, and if you hold block and press a direction, you'll avoid attacks. Hop over a sweep, duck under a high attack. It doesn't break enemy structure like a parry does, but it's great for someone like me that doesn't parry consistently, and it grants its own rewards in structure and focus regain, so you don't feel like you're missing out on something just because you don't want to or can't parry. Both methods have their benefits. You can duck an attack and counter hit, and your regular attacks all do a generous amount of structure damage, so I was able to play the whole game without parrying. It really helped me get into the game in the early hours until I started easing into the parry mechanic bit by bit. You also don't have to avoid anything on more than the last hit in a lot of situations. Whereas Sekiro wants you to try to parry as many attacks as you can, Sifu just needs you to get the avoid on the last attack so you can land a counter hit and use the stun window for a combo or throw. But if you block too much, your structure bar will break and you'll start taking damage. Learning to parry makes it much more possible to get the true ending by sparing the bosses instead of killing them. It's a cool reward for mastering that playstyle. After a while, I decided to go for it myself, using parries on the bosses, and yeah, it's cool I guess, but I don't really enjoy playing that way. And number 3, the most important difference, animation canceling. An animation cancel happens when you input a command that interrupts the frames of a previous command. In God of War, you can cancel your attacks with a roll if you're about to get hit. In fighting games, you can cancel the recovery frames of a normal attack by doing a special attack. For my Doom audience, quick swapping your weapons cancels the recovery animation after firing. Sifu allows you to cancel the startup or recovery frames of normal and special attacks into a block, avoid, parry, or dodge. In games like Sekiro and Dark Souls, once you hit that attack button, it's gonna come out and go through its full frames before you can do something else. Sekiro has a few frames where you can cancel an attack, but it's a short window, and once it's gone, you gotta wait for it to finish, which means you could get hit. The inability to animation cancel means you gotta be more careful with group encounters because attacking one enemy could get you hit by another. This isn't a bad thing, it's just a different kind of game. If Sifu didn't have animation canceling, you wouldn't be able to have these crazy kung fu movie style brawls surrounded by 8 people. Sifu's fast, liberating animation cancel system can be felt immediately, making combat and movement feel very fast, intuitive, and improvisational. It's a large part of what gives the game an arcadey, street-brawling feel. I'm not saying one system is better than another. If you put Sifu's system in Sekiro, it would break the game. If you put Sekiro's in Sifu, it would be unplayable. They're very different styles that have to be balanced appropriately. I just happen to have a monumental preference for Sifu's way of doing things. So let's get into the game proper now. Sifu takes you through 5 levels filled with challenging enemies, topped off with a 1v1 boss fight. Levels are linear with very little exploration. You'll find 2 or 3 shrines to upgrade your character, there's environmental objects to use as weapons, and you can find little notes and stuff that add to the story if you care about that, which I don't. I mean, I would. The setup is fine and the similarities to Kill Bill are obvious, but the actual story is hidden from the player, so I didn't find myself that interested. Every level has a wildly different theme. The locations are wholly unique from each other visually and musically. Their navigation is different too. Level 1, you're jumping from rooftops into drug labs. Level 2, you're rampaging through a downtown club. Level 3, you're working your way up the floors of an art museum, entering surreal magical spaces. Level 4 has elevators taking you up and down a tower until you hit the underground caverns. And Level 5 is like a relaxation center for the main boss, filled with gardens and massage rooms. Great variety. Some of these locations have rooms that are so visually breathtaking, I never tire of seeing them. Rooms contain throwable and swingable weapons, which are as devastating as you'd expect a real weapon to be in a close quarters fight. I love that. Weapons feel powerful, and you can use tables to slide around the room to get to more advantageous positions. Jumping through windows is commonly an option too. It feels like the devs watched as many martial arts movies as they could and tried to make sure we could do everything the stars could do. I'm terrible at discussing music in games. I never know what to say. I'll just say that it's really good and I like it. Each level has keys you can find that open shortcuts for repeat playthroughs, allowing you to skip significant portions of the level so you can get back to the boss fight. But if you take them, you're missing out on the points and XP you'd gain from going through the combat rooms, and you might miss out on shrine upgrades. You have a life bar and a structure bar, which is your stamina. Blocking drains your stamina to the point where you can't block for a while. Some enemies have hits that severely impact your structure, like the flaming punch from Sean's disciples. Structure recharges automatically, but also with every successful avoid as you're ducking under enemy attacks. Each enemy you defeat refills a sliver of health, and breaking an enemy's structure puts them into a glory kill state. I can't not make that comparison. It replenishes a bit of health and every time you get a sick animation. My favorites are the ones with weapons and the ones using the environment. Your focus bar gives you a super move of sorts, a targeted attack that can stun or do big damage to one enemy. Landing hits refills focus, as does avoiding attacks. When I say avoid, I mean ducking, just to be clear. Focus is crucial for taking out difficult enemies, landing big damage on a boss, or just getting a moment to breathe in the chaos. Special attacks like Palm Strike, Sweep, Snap Kick don't have to be used as solo attacks. You can attach them to attack strings. For example, we'll take the combo pressing heavy 4 times. Instead of the 4th heavy hit, which could end up getting blocked, connect it to a sweep and put the enemy on the ground fast. Any series of attacks can be linked into special moves. 2 heavy attacks into Palm Strike. 3 heavy attacks into backwards palm strike, 2 light attacks into crotch punch. All your attacks are appropriately stylish while also feeling believable and grounded. You've got a nice variety of options without being drowned in 30 different options at the beginning. I gotta say though, I'm disappointed in the lack of air attacks. Not necessarily double jump air combos, but it's surprising to see no jump kicks, hop kicks, etc. And I know I just praised the grounded tone of the combat, but God, wouldn't you just love to see Liu Kang's bicycle kick here? Maybe in Sifu too. Low tier enemies generally have 2 or 3 attack patterns that you'll start picking up on, and then you can avoid appropriately and counter hit for the punish. If you block these attacks, it can lead to them doing additional hits, chipping away at your structure even more. While Sifu definitely stresses good defense, you'll still be able to be very active in combat, flying forward with a snap kick into sweep, throwing bottles across the room, delivering a beatdown with a crowbar. You need to have the patience to wait and punish an attacking opponent, but that's not everything. When you start pushing people into walls and into other enemies to run in for the sweep, avoiding attacks becomes something you do on reaction for a quick punish. You're not just standing there and waiting. Mid and high level enemies have a variety of attack strings that takes a real getting used to, as they mix in low sweeps that have to be hopped if you want to punish, multiple structure break hits, and delayed attacks that will seriously screw you up until you learn the timing. There's so much cool stuff you can do with your special moves too. Crotch punch can low profile high attacks and put someone in stun, sweep can be inputted backwards for a low profile defensive sweep, and palm strike can come out backwards for a devastating pushing kick that says, "Back the fuck off me, I'm not ready for you yet." Weapons can be thrown at enemies so you can sweep them and get rid of their weapon. Multi-hitting attacks can be hard to do when surrounded, but it'll build your focus bar more. Special attacks give you new weapon attacks too. If you input the crotch punch move while holding a weapon, you get new animations. Holding the charged back fist attack with a sword will instantly kill someone, even a high tier enemy. This game is just so goddamn interesting. Enemies have different durations of stun after a counter hit, so there's motivation to learn enemy-specific combos for punishes, which can evolve over time as you start working in new attacks from the upgrade list. Some attacks that feel kind of underpowered can suddenly show their utility in situations you hadn't considered. My favorite example is Flowing Claw. It turns your back to the enemy and then does a roundhouse or a series of punches. Doesn't feel that special really. But did you know that after you do a ground hit on a downed enemy and you're facing someone that you want to back off, Flowing Claw can turn your back to them and then you can input Palm Strike to get the backwards Palm Strike kick and send them flying away. How badass is that? After I learned that, I started kicking every single one of these motherfuckers because that kick is an excellent interrupting attack resulting in massive structure damage. I started using Flowing Claw into back kick to counter approaching enemies, and connecting it to chasing strikes for the extra focus build. I'm using Flowing Claw after a ground hit to set up a roundhouse that knocks down several surrounding enemies. I'm using Flowing Claw after a combo to get 3 hits of block damage on a big enemy, chipping away at his structure because enemies won't parry this attack if you lead with it. This is depth. This is what I love about Sifu. I also really like that unlockable skills don't feel that powerful while you're still learning the game. It doesn't feel like you can just unlock something and lean on it. Each tool is a subtle addition to your arsenal of kicks and punches, technical expansions, and the better you get at the game, the more useful they become. If you're used to games where you unlock significant powerful moves as you play, these unlockable skills may feel underwhelming. But anything more powerful would distract from the process of mastering the basics first. And once you've mastered the basics, the utility of the unlockable skills becomes more apparent. There's really cool tech in this game that will appeal to people involved in competitive fighting games. Since any move can be animation cancelled, you can use ducks and hops to cancel any attack, leading to attack string loops on stunned enemies. Instead of doing 4 heavy attacks and knocking an enemy down, you can do 2 heavies and then cancel the string with a duck and then start another attack string. Underused attacks like Hook Intercept can now be strung together in stun punishes for massive damage. Super Dizzy stun states can fit in multiple repetitions of heavy attacks and multi-hit moves to build focus bar, and vertical strikes can lead to combos in the double digits. This tech in Sifu is a fighting game player's dream. If Sifu had a style meter and a ranking system, I would have had to redo my style meter video to include it because it represents so much of what I think makes for a rewarding and challenging combat experience. Mastering the different tools at your disposal is the key to success. Becoming a badass at this game means you're playing in a flashy, creative, and fun way. The game doesn't want you to just look for 1 or 2 moves that work all the time. It wants you to learn its systems and engage with them. On top of your performance resulting in success and super stylish combat, you're awarded more points if you can keep your multiplier going. Getting hit reduces the multiplier, so that's a nice incentive to maintain good defense and not overextend. Higher point totals will unlock upgrades for structure and focus regain, with the most expensive upgrade being increased structure damage for parries. There's even a taunt button that doubles your multiplier, so if you get hit, try to find an opportunity to work in a taunt. Careful, it has long recovery, which can be animation cancelled, yes! But the game is quite difficult. Sifu is a roguelite, meaning you're supposed to try to get as far as you can, die, and start over using your unlocked abilities and accumulated knowledge to help you get further. I think that's a good place to start mixing praise with points of criticism because it's the defining feature of the game and requires some explaining. New moves must be purchased with XP and then repurchased 5 times to make them permanent. That means if you buy something like Snap Kick, but you don't perma-unlock it, when you lose all your lives and start the level over, you will not have Snap Kick anymore. I understand what they're going for here, and I think once you're a mid to high level player it works well, but for a new player I think it creates way too much pressure to grind out one move at a time. If you find a move you like, you gotta keep unlocking it every time you restart a level, so you should just dump all your XP into that one move so it becomes permanent. Well, once you're thinking like that, it doesn't make any sense to buy other moves and experiment with all the other options. It feels like the smartest thing to do is to just pick one, perma-unlock it, and then pick another. Why unlock 5 or 6 different moves when I'm learning the game and getting my ass kicked when I'm just gonna lose them all anyway? It feels a bit confused. I think maybe the upcoming easy mode should have a reduced perma-unlock cost, maybe 3 instead of 5 to encourage more experimentation. Every time you die, you get older. The first death adds 1 year to your age. The second adds 2, it's exponential. Once you're crossing into death 6, you're getting old really fast. When you're in your 70s, you'll hit the limit and the level is over. The age you finish the first level at is carried over to the second. So if you're starting level 2 at age 30 and you die of old age, you restart at age 30. You take this as far as you can go through 5 levels, until you realize you're simply too old to have a chance, and you go back to an earlier level, trying to get out fairly young once you know what you're doing. As you get older, your character starts doing more damage. The trade-off is that you have less HP, and certain upgrades get locked off. Here at the shrine, you can't unlock these upgrades past the age number above each one. But what about the unlockable attacks? Each tier is locked past certain ages. Once you're older than 29, you can't unlock anything from the bottom tier. But there's nothing here to indicate that. New players might want something from that tier but buy something else first, and then they hit age 30 and they're locked out. It would be nice to at least know there's a limit. The game should probably be updated to have those age limits listed. It's all a very interesting system, one that requires mastery. It's certainly gonna turn off a lot of players because you'll probably get to level 3 at an old age and you'll run into a wall of frustration, realizing you need to start over after hours of just trying to get where you are. And it feels like if you aren't really getting what you're doing wrong, there's nothing to help you. There's no training mode except against a single enemy type, no unlockable boss training either. You gotta grind it out. Sifu, in my experience, starts off fun for the first hours, becomes close to miserable for a few more, and then evens out for the most part. The issue is that the difficulty doesn't feel gradual. Level 2 throws large groups of enemies at you, and several of the most difficult to learn enemies in the game. Enemies with multiple attack options with different timings, attacks that break your structure, and low attacks. Some have long-range weapons, including the boss, who is a lot of work to figure out. When you get to him, you're probably close to death and you'll die and have to restart the entire level. Level 2's shortcut doesn't go to the boss. You still have several difficult combat rooms and mini-boss encounters to go through every time. It's brutal. I can honestly say I didn't enjoy my time here, because whenever I died to the boss, I felt like it was because I didn't have enough time to figure him out. I wasn't playing well enough yet. I wanted to have another chance at him right away, but I had to push through like 7 other fights under the pressure of trying not to lose lives just to have a shot at him again. It's the same feeling I got from Dark Souls, where I would die to a boss I didn't understand, and the game sent me back to the last campfire, and I had to make it through a bunch of fights I already beat and didn't want to do anymore. I'm not saying this kind of design is universally bad, it has its fans, but I don't like it when you're dealing with some technical bosses that take multiple attempts to even develop a strategy against. Level 2 feels very all or nothing, like learn all this shit now or don't even bother continuing. That's gonna be really polarizing, and I think they could have structured this game better to ease players into its mechanics, instead of just shoving them all into a level 2 gauntlet. The rest of the game feels comparatively easy after level 2, except for the final boss, but we'll get to him later. It is utterly soul-crushing to have to play the same fights over and over when all you want to do is fight the boss again. For me, it just sucked all the fun out of the level, and it's hard to know what to suggest. Maybe just a second shortcut option? Level 3 has a shortcut going directly to the boss. Maybe the developers just didn't realize how many people would be struggling with this level and this boss. By the way, this is all from the perspective of the learning experience. At this point, I enjoy the club and I don't struggle with it. That's not the point though. I'm talking about how this game is structured to introduce itself to new players, and we're gonna talk more about that soon. Now, I don't want you to think I'm just hating on the roguelite design of Sifu. It's true that I personally would have preferred a big 12-level campaign experience instead of a 5-level repeating challenge, but when I got to the point where I started my 3rd attempt from level 1, it just clicked. I stopped overextending, I learned how to pause before avoiding the unblockable from Sean's disciples, and I punished. I made smart use of my focus ability. I held block more instead of trying to constantly dash away. And I started using push attacks not just for crowd control, but for structure breaks. Directional throw is also excellent for this. After a parry, you can throw enemies in any direction. This also works after an avoid if you hit them to stun and then you can throw. This brings me to a huge issue that Sifu has. When talking about the difficulty of level 2, people tend to get focused on Sean, the boss, or this fight, or that fight. Should there be less high-level enemies? Should the boss be less damaging? That's not really the problem. In my opinion, the majority of the fun in Sifu is not figuring out everything you're supposed to do. It's in keeping it all in your head and executing it under pressure. The developers obviously agree with that opinion because they tell you about a buttload of attack and defend options in the intro level. They are telling you what to use and expecting you to use it. It's just badly paced and underdeveloped. I'm not saying every enemy and boss needs to be explained to you, definitely not. But there are core mechanics of the game that are poorly explained, misleading, or simply stated once and then forgotten about. Directional throw is a game changer when you start using it, but it's the first thing they tell you about in the intro cinematic. It's super easy to forget this move exists, as it's a bit technical. The game makes you do it after a parry once, and parries can take a while to get used to if you use parries at all. But it doesn't ask you to do it to a stunned enemy after an avoid and counter hit, which is so much more important. I spent 2 days playing the game thinking I couldn't use directional throw because I don't parry. I'm sure I'm not the only person who experienced this. And there's no reminder about this or anything later on. I strongly believe that Sifu needs tutorial screens when the game is loading. No interruptions to the gameplay, no mandatory tutorials. Just when you die and it's loading, there's a little screen that shows off an important mechanic. Palm Strike can push an enemy far away, even into a wall. Sweep enemies to put them on the ground quickly. Directional throw can be performed when enemies are stunned after a counter hit. And the counter hit stun mechanic. Look, I'm not saying the game has to tell you about backwards palm strike being a kick, or that you can throw enemies off balconies, or that you can throw a weapon at an armed enemy to go in and disarm them, or even that some enemies have delays before their attacks. That stuff is all fine to keep for player discovery and emergent gameplay moments. I'm not asking the game to tell you about animation cancel combos. But the fucking stun system? It's the core of the game. The game makes no effort to explain to new players that ducking an incoming attack and punishing quickly puts them into a stun state that allows a long combo punish or throw. And it's absolutely vital to the experience. You can't even find a lesson about this by going into training mode. That's why players are getting their asses handed to them by level 2, because you can make it through level 1 by mashing crazy buttons and not blocking or avoiding attacks. And then you go to the club and you're dealing with mid-tier enemies and a boss that are designed to test your knowledge of the avoid and stun systems, which many people still don't even know exist. It's not surprising that so many new players have completely given up before passing level 2. It's not their fault. You can't expect people to come across this tiny icon at the bottom of a fairly meaningless detective board to read a small blurb about the avoid and stun system. But they put it here. They knew it was important to communicate. So why is it just buried here on the detective board? Certainly they didn't think people were going to look at this detective board where you collect notes about the story and think it also contained vital gameplay mechanics. Give us hints in the loading screens after dying. Give us a fleshed out training mode that lets you activate different tutorials for practicing important mechanics. Slow clap, play Streets of Rage 4, look at their training mode, practice throwing and catching weapons, practice special cancels, practice combos, practice throws, spawn any enemy you want, even multiples of them, to practice guarding and punishing. Having these options doesn't hurt your game, it enhances it, especially when you're encouraging mastery like this. While we're on the topic of difficulty, I fully support the addition of an easy mode, considering how poorly Sifu teaches players what they need to survive. I don't think it needs to be button mash easy, but something lighter is definitely welcome. And I'm someone who can beat the game without dying. I don't need an easy mode. I wouldn't play it. But if level 2 is going to remain as it is with a shitty shortcut, and there's not going to be any hints about the mechanics people need to actually enjoy this game, then yeah, give them an easy mode. Because it's very difficult to recommend this game to people at the moment. And I want to recommend it. It's some of the best combat I've ever experienced. But unless I'm personally there helping someone learn the concepts, it's 50-50 if they're going to get it or not. A low difficulty option would be great for people who need more time to figure out how the game is played, and when they get it, they can raise the difficulty, because that's how it works. Naysayers have this bizarre idea that if you give people an easy mode, everyone is going to do that and the game will be ruined. Come on, do you really think there wouldn't be a good number of people who play easy first, start to love the game, and then bump up the difficulty? Not everyone is that good or that committed to suffering. But I don't have this attitude of fuck anyone who can't do it. I want people to get better, and to have an appropriate path to get them where they need to be. I don't want a button mashing easy mode for Sifu, I just want something less brutal that also produces knowledgeable and excited players on the other side. I understand there's a concern for trophies. People don't want the trophies they worked hard for to be gettable through easy mode. Fine, I guess they should figure that out. Because look, it's not about the game being too hard or people having a bad attitude. It's about the game poorly teaching you the skills it expects you to know, and having a terrible training mode for trying to understand the game. It's about dumping a bag of mechanics in the player's lap all at once, omitting the communication of specific very important mechanics, having a first level that is fairly easily passed by most people having no idea what they're doing, and then having a second level that says, "Show me what you've learned," when they haven't learned anything. Let's move on to the boss fights. I'm torn. I think these are really cool fights. The characters are all very different from each other visually and functionally. I love their stages too. My favorite is probably karaoke in the snow and then fighting in the rain. Boss fights lean heavy on defense, counter hits, and learning the specific attack strings so you can avoid or parry. They're well designed, they're interesting, they're fun to master once you set your mind to it. But they're a bit at odds with where the fun of this game is. The fights start to feel very slow because you're only landing a couple hits here and there, and then blocking a whole bunch and trying to figure out what the hell is going on. I'm not saying that's bad or shouldn't be in the game, but maybe it should have just been 1 or 2 of the boss fights and not all 5. When it's just one-on-one, you lose that spontaneity of gameplay, where at any moment someone might attack you, or throw a bottle at your head and you have to react. You could get grabbed by a fat guy while desperately trying to get a takedown for more life. You land a sick last-second back kick to defend your position and then slide across a table. No matter how good you get at Sifu, something unexpected can always come your way. But not in the boss fights. Once you know them, you know them. I think it would have been more interesting to include other enemies in some of the boss fights to keep things less predictable. Now, you certainly couldn't just take the bosses as they currently are and add other enemies to them. That would be ridiculous. I'm saying I wish the boss fights were designed differently altogether, with the consideration of other enemies around. Sifu's boss fights feel like you're not playing Sifu anymore. They feel like, okay, stand here and memorize this boss's crazy-ass attack patterns, and you can't really do much until you do. And again, they aren't bad fights at all. I've enjoyed learning and mastering them, but I didn't find the initial experience against them very exciting. And now that I have mastered them, they're completely uninteresting compared to the main fights in the rest of the game. You're just learning the patterns, blocking, and punishing. I think that's a shame. These boss fights could have been so much better if they kept the flow of Sifu's room-to-room gameplay. Yang is the biggest offender of this, because not only has most of the game of Sifu stopped during his fight, but you can't use your focus bar. You allow players to invest 4 upgrades into focus bar, 3 upgrades into focus regain, and spend their hard-earned XP unlocking and perma-unlocking like 5 different focus attacks, probably sacrificing the unlocking of other useful skills, and then you get to the boss and the game says, all that stuff you've been investing in for the past 10 hours can't be used anymore, sorry. I don't know what they were thinking with this. On top of Yang being full of crazy confusing strings and having the tiniest punish windows in the game, only 2 hits in his second phase, he was incredibly boring to figure out and the fight just went on so long. And look, I've come to appreciate the Yang fight. I felt great about beating him deathless. I did a strategy video on how to deal with his sweeps. I enjoy the fight. That doesn't change the experience I had the first times though. An experience that could have been way better if they hadn't designed the fight this way. I think Yang shouldn't have straight up disabled your focus bar. I understand the argument that doing so makes him more skill-based, and once you're smart about focus bar, you can do some cheesy stuff. Yeah, okay. But that doesn't mean they had to take it away. They could have simply reduced his focus attack stun window dramatically, and I think he should have had focus break attacks. Take his structure break attacks and make them also drain a bunch of focus. That would reduce the prevalence of focus attacks in the fight to make it more skill-based while still preserving an important mechanic the game has been establishing up to that point. Alright, before we wrap this up, let's get into a few easily fixable issues and quality of life improvements. There's no new game plus. You're able to continue playing the game after you win, unlocking more moves, but all your shrine bonuses reset. We need to be able to start a whole new campaign with everything unlocked, including shrine bonuses, and just have some fun in levels with higher enemy counts and damage. Toss in some more high-level enemies early on, mix it up. For a roguelite, this game is seriously lacking in the replay department. Focus attack auto-targets the closest enemy even when multiple enemies are in range. This leads to frustrating moments of not being able to use focus on the actual enemy you're trying to hit. At least give us the ability to click in the analog stick to cycle enemies on screen. All cutscenes need to be skippable. The prologue level as Yang needs to be skippable, and for the love of God, please make the opening credits tutorial skippable. It's crazy that every time I start a new game, I have to go through 5 minutes of tutorials and cinematics. All menus, including shrine bonuses, need to have a dark mode option. The blinding white light is hell on the eyes. Auto target lock needs work. The game will decide who it thinks you want to be fighting, even if you're pressing the stick towards another enemy and pressing attack. You get magnetized onto enemies and end up striking someone you don't want to. I'm sure this system is necessary to some degree, but it could use some fine-tuning. We need to be able to bind weapon pickup to a separate button, so we don't accidentally pick up weapons when we do takedowns. I think modifiers would be cool, like increase frequency of buffed enemies, decrease weapon duration, etc., for replay challenges since the game is so short. And that's it, I guess. Am I forgetting something? Oh right, the camera. Holy shit! Slow clap. 2004's Ninja Gaiden called. It wants its camera problems back. This is by far the worst and most frustrating aspect of Sifu. There's no reason to ever zoom the camera in on your character in a brawler. Just because every game under the goddamn sun uses this stupid over-the-shoulder close-up camera doesn't mean that you have to do it here too. There is nothing wrong with having a pulled-back camera and letting the players see what's around them, even when there's no combat happening. When you start attacking in an open space, the camera pulls back, because they know that you need to see what's happening around you, but the camera can't deal with anything if the space isn't open. Levels are often full of claustrophobic spaces where enemies can pin you against the wall, and for reasons I guess I simply can't imagine, there's no transparency applied to the walls so the camera can hang back and let you see what's happening. The camera doesn't adjust itself to better frame the action, and I can't tell you how many times I was utterly fucked by the camera in this game. 90% of my deaths are camera caused, trying to dodge structure break punches and fucking sweeps that I can't see. Trying to land a counter hit, but I have to take my thumb off the face buttons to spin the camera around. It's such an interruption. The camera even freaks out when you're standing next to objects. I'm not even next to a wall, but because I'm next to this thing, the camera feels like it needs to zoom in and show me the inside of my asshole. This does not service the combat. You've gotta maintain consistent camera distance and apply transparency to the walls. Look at how this is handled in For Honor. This is beautiful, no interruption to gameplay, full visibility, not this. You know what, I take it back. Comparing this camera to Ninja Gaiden is an insult to Ninja Gaiden's camera because for all the issues it has, that camera at least makes an effort to intelligently frame each room. If you get near a spot where you would be obscured, the camera flips to another angle so you can see what's happening. It can be disorienting, but man, it sure is nice to be able to see my immediate threats. Please, for the love of God, overhaul the camera system. Sifu sold really well. Use some of that money to get someone who knows what they're doing when designing intelligent camera systems. The camera should never get this close to the character when fighting. Okay, rant over. There's DLC coming, I'm hyped for that. I can only speculate, but I'd imagine it's going to be some more enemy types for a new game plus, better training mode, maybe a wave-based survival mode and boss rush mode. Basically the Streets of Rage 4 treatment. That would be awesome. Because I really love this game. It's just lacking in content. That's the issue with it being a 5-level roguelite. If this were a fully fledged campaign experience, it would have a lot more replay value, I think. In the meantime, mods. Lots and lots of mods. Play as John Wick. Play as Shaggy. Play as fucking Kung Fu Panda. Play as enemy characters. Use boss attacks and spin around like Kuroki. I want a gore mod. Nothing too extreme, just some more blood. If I hit someone's head against the wall with a bat, there should be blood on the wall, and on their head. I don't think the official game needs a bunch of blood, but a mod would be great. So, do I recommend Sifu? Yes, I do. If you've made it to the end of this video, you have a decent understanding of what you're getting into, and the mechanics that you need to know. You're probably gonna have a good time. Do I recommend it for people who have no idea what they're doing? That's harder to answer. The stats don't lie, lots of players quit on level 2, and I've made the case here that it's entirely the fault of the game for not preparing people for the challenge. So I'd say wait for the game to offer an easy mode, or until there's better instruction included so jumping into normal isn't so merciless. Sifu is an early contender for Game of the Year for me. It's rare that I get this involved with a game and play it to death. In 2020, it was Doom Eternal, in 2021, it was Streets of Rage 4, and in 2022, it's this. I dedicated a lot of this video to criticism because I honestly think this game can be better. I want it to be better. I want to show it to more people, but it needs to be better. Thank you for watching this review. Peace.